I wanted to make a short video because I have heard from several students who report that their scores for the March SAT 2024 were not as high as they would have expected. And given that I practiced with a lot of them, I can absolutely agree that they were not as high as I expected. And here's a couple of points I want to make clear. One, this is the first time that the College Board has given this version of the SAT in the United States. You can go back to other times that the College Board has given SATs, even once it was established, where there were wacky things that happened. Remember, there was a June a few years ago that showed ridiculously out of whack scores, and there were all sorts of articles about it. So the first thing is, I do think there's something to the fact that this is new and they are still maybe struggling to calibrate. Second, there are not a lot of questions on this test compared to old tests. With fewer questions means every single question is worth more. Now, that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you get those right, and maybe you guess right, your score could be higher than you expect. But on the flip side, if you don't, then your score is going to be lower than you expect. The good news about that is you could take it again and see a big jump. And in the initial report put out by the College Board in their experimenting with this new digital test, there was all sorts of commentary about the fact that scores were highly volatile. So the same kid was taking the test again and seeing a big difference and really hadn't done anything differently. So that's an important point to remember too. Because there are so fewer questions on this test, I absolutely think it is more important for kids to take it more than once. I am not going to be surprised if kids take it a second time and just see a jump and didn't even do any studying or anything in between, right? There's that volatility there. So that's another thing. Please just take it again, all right? See what happens. That's really a huge piece of advice I didn't used to believe in as much, but now I really do. The next thing, the ACT is a test I didn't typically recommend. It's longer, it's harder in some ways. But what I am now seeing is because the ACT is still on paper, or at least that's an option. You, I think, can do it digitally in some places, but it's on paper. It is going to be helpful for kids who still process better on paper. And that's like data proves that we all actually, in general, process better on paper. So I would highly recommend that students who didn't do well on the SAT, who really want to submit standardized test scores to colleges, still hang in there and maybe take the ACT. Now, the ACT, you can get your scores back for this March exam and have time to still consider whether to take the ACT, because that deadline, I believe, is May 8th for the June test. Everything you learned in an SAT prep class is helpful to taking the ACT. There will be some tweaks, okay? The reading section on the ACT is unlike the new digital SAT, it's split up into reading and writing and language, whereas now the SAT is combined. The reading passages are longer on the ACT and then have questions, unlike the SAT where there's a little passage and a question. We can easily work through those strategies, and I can add to them if you'd like to do that. So ACT, definitely an option for some students who just feel like this wasn't consistent with my practice, with my understanding of the material. Okay. Now, if you just think like, oh, I'm just disappointed, like I just wish I did better, you don't really have any data to prove that like you maybe like should have done better, then I don't know. I don't know how realistic maybe your goals were, right? You'd want to kind of go back to the practice. So the last note I want to mention is that the College Board just this week, so March 2024, late March 2024, released 2 more digital tests. You can find them on Blue Book, the app, or the PDFs are posted. Again, those are not adaptive, but there's a digital test 5 in PDF and on Blue Book, and there's a test 6. we understand from just looking at this quickly that the math is a lot harder on test 5 and 6 than it was on test 1 through 4. And a lot of kids were complaining that the test math was like so much harder than they had practiced in the practice tests. So I highly recommend going to those tests and doing them for practice. And again, getting really good with Desmos on the math section if you were not comfortable the first time. So those, I just want to do a 5-minute video to give you a couple of tips, hopefully say, listen, hang in there, okay? Things don't always happen right on the first time, but that doesn't mean you can't do this. And it doesn't mean you did not learn a lot, and all of that can come and help you the second time around if it didn't help you the first time. More than happy to help you do that. Don't give up. You can do this.